Ever wonder what makes really creative people tick? Where do their ideas come from? What keeps them energized? What kinds of things get in their way? Is their life really as much fun as it looks from the outside? Hello, I'm your host, Lily Pierpont, and this is ArtStorming, a podcast about how new ideas come to life and become paintings, sculptures, plays, or poems, performances, or collections. Each episode, I'll chat with a guest from the arts community and explore how the most creative among us stare down a blank canvas or reach into the void and create something new. I am with April Cleveland, and I will have not to prompt her to project her voice because she is an actor.
Well, I'm a director.
Among other things, she's a director in her current. But you've been an actor, right? I mean, you present in a very.
I give actor.
You give actor, yeah. So anyway, we're here, and she was nice enough to come to my house, and Bree is also here, so hopefully she won't make any noise. But okay, so I'm so glad you're here, and I had the great privilege of seeing a performance, a pre-performance, I guess is what you call it, of Cyrano, and it was amazing. And during that, so I'm going to let you introduce yourself because your story is so great. And one of the reasons I wanted to get you on this episode is because I saw a presentation that you gave at Creative Mornings, and your origin story is one of the most compelling I have heard in a long time. So I'm just going to give you the mic and let you do that all over again.
Okay.
Yeah, so you got started, I mean, and how you got to Santa Fe and how you started Exodus.
Yeah.
So I want to hear it all.
Okay.
Or I want them to hear it all.
So I'll distill a little because that talk was 30 minutes long. But basically, I was born in Champaign, Illinois, and I started acting when I was a kid. And, you're not really able to, you can't be a child director. So the only way that I had access to theater was through doing musicals and performing at school and performing in every community theater. But were you
wanting to be a director because you were bossy already and wanted to, or you had a vision already is what a better way to say it?
I think I was directing very young, naturally, on the playground. I would force my friends. I couldn't imagine why they didn't want to do this all recess, but I would force them to be directed by me in these skits or plays every recess. And I would get a lot of pushback, and it was kind of the only thing that I wanted to do, from elementary school. So I guess I started doing that really early. And I realized that I wanted to direct when I was maybe 12 or 13. And it was because I would watch this director in this summer theater company that I would do. And I would just sort of feel that's what I want to do. I see her running the rehearsal and giving notes and having a vision. And I don't even remember why, but it was just I was very attracted to that role in the room, and kind of set my eyes on that when I was, 13 years old. And then after high school, undertook a very long training program that I designed for myself. To set myself up to enter the world as a director. So I started with 4 years of acting school at the Strasberg Institute in West Hollywood. I moved to LA in high school, so that was in my backyard. Did that for 4 years, then came to Santa Fe for the first time and went to St. John's College because I knew that was, I didn't talk that much about that at Creative Mornings, but St. John's was probably the most foundational educational period for me as a director, because for me, directing starts with being able to find the deepest questions and contradictions within a text.
And just for people who don't know about St. John's, it's a curriculum that's based on the classics.
Yeah.
So it's a deep immersion into a very, I don't want to say limited as if it's limited, but into a very specific number of books and texts that you go deeply into.
Yeah, and it's a very peculiar school, and you have to be, it's not a school that most people would want to go to because you get no choices. So if you go to St. John's, you have an all-required curriculum across all 4 years. And it's not just the humanities, it includes math and science, and there's no textbooks. Everything is from a primary source, which is really attractive to me because I was sort of like uncomfortable with the idea of textbooks and secondary literature in general. And there was something really appealing about like, I really struggled with math in high school, but like, what if I could go back to the beginning? And what if I could study math, starting with Euclidean geometry, like before there's numbers? And is there something about like going all the way back to first principles and then working your way to modernity that could like kind of answer this question that I was looking for in literature and philosophy and drama and math and science? So I went there because I wanted to be able to look at any text, whatever it was, no matter how hard it was, and find my way into it. And I thought that like, okay, if I'm going to be the kind of director I want to be, then I want to be able to tackle anything, even if it's not like my gift, like a math text or something. So I went to St. John's for 4 years, met my partner, which is important in my story. We were both students. Then I went and got my MFA in directing in Chicago at DePaul University. And that is where I got to practice directing intensively for 3 years. And I got to work with like really amazing undergraduate actors. After after DePaul, I started directing in Chicago and New York, and I was about to go to London to help bring over some West End shows to New York. So things were like very exciting and big, and that was 2020. And so COVID happened, and I was working on a show. It was about to open, it was shut down, and then like everything I had lined up for the next year and a half, which was a lot of huge projects, were just like bam, bam, bam. It was like within, 2 weeks, everything 16 months out just stopped.
Yeah.
And it did for everybody I knew. And then in July of 2020, my partner, who was defending his dissertation at the time, was hired back at St. John's to be on the faculty. And so we sublet our apartment in Chicago where we were living, and we drove to Santa Fe. And on the way to Santa Fe, I got the idea that all these incredible actors I knew who I really wanted, like my vision was like, okay, one day I'm going to be up there enough as a director that I'll be able to get all these people back into a room together. And all I wanted was to like have this group of people that I'd gone to school with who were so amazing, be able to be in a show together that I would direct. And I was like, that might be in 15 or 20 years. But in COVID, they all lost their work. So I was like, you know what? I'm going to invite them all to move to Santa Fe, New Mexico with me for what I thought would be a short period of time and just make some work together. So I sent this like crazy 8-page email about why I thought they should move to Santa Fe, what I wanted to create together, and also that they needed to do it in like 3 weeks and that we'd figure it out. So I sent the email on July 30th of 2020, and on September 1st of 2020, I think 8 actors arrived in Santa Fe, and we all moved into a house together, and we started to create work together that answered the question, how can we make theater that isn't boring to us? Because we were all professional, I'm a director, but they were all professional actors, trained in theater, but had gotten very quickly soured by what was available in the professional regional theater world. And we wanted to make something that we would be captivated if we could see. And so we spent a lot of time interrogating everything about theater and coming up with the values that we would share and rally around and create work around. And we chose words like color saturated, fast paced, what else was there? Like daring, edgy, irreverent, like disgusting but sexy. Like we just chose these words and we're like, okay, we're gonna make work like that.
Well, I just want to pause for a second because all those terms that you just threw out are were very much present in the presentation that I saw.
That's great. Yeah.
So I mean, you've succeeded in taking it not only from inception to is your what performance, the Cyrano?
400 something. It's our 7th like production that we've created together, and like our 400 something performance together.
Unbelievable.
Yeah.
So go back to, so you are crafting this way forward, and you're all living in the house together, and that must have been its own story.
Yeah, it was. And, I had a sense, I was a bit older than everyone else because I had been a grad student when I met all these undergraduate actors. So they were all 22 years old-ish when they moved here. I was like 31. And I had this sense that, like, okay, not only do we need to go back to the first principles of what matters to us in live theater, we need to go back to the first principles of how people coexist together. Because I had this feeling that, like, okay, this could go really wrong. And having we should never just assume that we share the same living standards. So I remember this moment that at the time I felt like was so silly, but now I'm glad I did this, where I had everybody together and I picked up a spray bottle and a paper towel and demonstrated how to spray down a counter. And then, because I just remembered from early roommate situations that so much bad stuff happens when we don't communicate and share standards about how to share space. And so I feel like it's really important that we know how to do this or everything's going to fall apart. And we instituted a weekly deep clean, which had a full-blown spreadsheet checklist. And every week there was 3 hours set aside where the house had to be deep cleaned. And so it was a combination of insane theatrical experimentation and an experiment in how do you get 10 people to share a space without killing each other. And it was sort of equal parts. Yeah, it was St. Johnsy in a way, because it was let's go back to the beginning of everything.
Yeah.
How to make art,
but
how to be with each other.
Brilliant you hear about exercises that companies where they take people to kind of do a bonding exercise. What better bonding exercise? And the fact that you were able to integrate the theater into it. I mean, were people pretty lighthearted about it and kind of took on roles and practiced things? Or what did that end up looking like? Or were you just scrubbing toilets like regular people?
Well, we were definitely scrubbing toilets, but I think the thing I really thought about before I brought everyone together was what is this going to look like? And where are we going to focus our time? And we knew that we were going to take these 3 months to create one major work. And that was a decision. And then on the side of that, we would create, other smaller adjacent projects. And then we would also take time to train as an ensemble and to forge a vocabulary together through different methods, from actual actor training exercises to going up the mountain together to the Aspens and pitching source authors. So we had a lot. We were focused on the hydros that we were going to undertake, and we knew we were going to make one big thing. And so it was how are we going to do that? That was a question. We ended up choosing to read a bunch of public domain texts. And the reason we did that was because anything in the public domain, which is before, it's something like 1923. It changes every year by a year. We can change it however we want. So if you take something that was written in the 1800s, you can slice it up and you can edit it and you can inject it and you can say it in your own words. And there's nothing wrong with that.
And is that why we see so many iterations of Shakespeare, for example?
It might be. Yeah. It's Shakespeare, Chekhov, Ibsen, anything before 1920 something is just up for grabs.
Right.
It's also something you don't have to pay for rights for. So it was we were thinking practically in a way, which is we don't have any money, so we can't buy rights. And also we want to be loyal to the author by identifying what we think is the essence of something and then adapting it into our own voice and our own contemporary
again, very
moment.
St. Johnsian.
Yeah. And it was we're not going to be beholden to an author because they're important or because they're old or because they wanted something. We're going to look into the text for ourselves and we're going to find what we think are the bones and the muscles. And then we're going to discard everything else. And we're going to try to make something that hopefully the original author, and who cares because they're dead, would either be really proud of or really angry at, but that we decide as a group is like the DNA that we're going to take and run with. So we read all these public domain texts. We read the Bible. We read Shakespeare, Chekhov, Ibsen. We read a bunch of stuff. And then we ended up voting on the author. So the author we voted on was Chekhov. And it was because we had a literary appreciation of Chekhov, but none of us had ever been satisfied seeing Chekhov.
Oh, interesting.
And we were like, okay, this is something you study in school. It's something you know is beautiful. But when you go to see it, it very rarely makes you laugh out loud or actually cry or feel alive. Can we make it feel alive? So we voted on Chekhov, and then we pitched all of Chekhov's major plays to each other, and we took a vote on which play it would be, and we ended up selecting the play Ivanov, which is one of his least known plays. And it's basically about a sad guy who has a series of tragedies that he kind of brings upon himself and ends up taking his own life. And so we chose that show, but we chose to do it through the lens of like a teenage drama. And we were thinking about TV shows like Skins or Degrassi or like The OC. And we were like, okay, Chekhov is about all these relationships between people who are like kind of in love with each other, but kind of hate each other, but kind of can't, but have a lot of unrequited feelings. Well, that's a lot like shows we watch, like Euphoria or The OC. What if we made a Chekhov play that felt like that fast paced and like that high stakes?
Right.
And
add all
young.
those terms into it, like the colorful and the
Yeah. And so that was our challenge to ourselves. We were like, we're bored every time we go to see this. What's wrong? Can we unboring it? And then we set about devising that show. And we made it in our house from September to December of 2020. And Santa Fe was totally shut down. You couldn't go in restaurants. It was that period. So we didn't have anybody else in town. We just had each other and our like excursions to the hot springs and stuff. So we had like ourselves, our house, and the outdoors. And we would just spend every day creating this show through our own weird process, which is a series of like improvisations that get iterated over time.
So how did you start with the script and then deviate, or did you rewrite the script, or did you just get to know the material so well that you just say, let's do the scene where this and such happens, go?
Yeah, we actually we kind of intentionally try to not get to know the script well. Like we read it, I think we read Ivanov twice, and then we put it down and we never looked at it again. And then we did an exercise where we're like, okay, everybody, we've read it once or twice. We're not allowed to look at it. Write down all the major events that you remember. And it was sort of an exercise to be like, what from your gut?
What's stuck?
Yeah, what sticks? What's the story? Without being able to look and be like, well, this happens and this happens. And from that exercise, we were able to get like a vertebra of like major events. And we never looked at the script again. And then we started thinking about, okay, it's a this many act play. These are the big things that happen in each act. Let's start improvising around those events. And like, we also are going to have to kill off all the adults because everybody's 22 in our company. And so like that play has like these two important parental figures. Our parental figures like die in a car accident at the very beginning, which sort of sets the show in motion.
Yeah.
And then we would create characters, relationships, and events that have been translated into our, at the time, like 21st century world with these characters in this place. And our characters in Ivanov are Santa Feans. Like they're these siblings who live in New York who have a lot of money, and their parents die in this car accident, and they decide that they're going to go back to their roots, which is this like house in Santa Fe, because that's where we lived. And so it's like, well, we're in this house. This is the house that these characters live in, and this is the house that the other characters kind of come into, and this is where it's going to take place. And so we would like create scenes in every room And that play just started to organically be this experience that moved from room to room. And it was this old house, like many are in Santa Fe, that had this like wraparound like retainer wall. So it already felt like this kind of old Chekhovian estate. And like everything was connected. There was like 30 doors because it's Santa Fe, and the whole experience would just like weave from room to room.
Like a real rabbit warren.
Yeah. And it's like this scene would be out in the front lawn, and then you'd climb through the window and it would be the next scene in the bedroom, and then...
And this is all a co-creation.
Yeah.
And as a director, like that's, and you're going to have to help me understand a little bit between, obviously you're not imposing a vision. You're letting everybody kind of co-create, and then you're sort of stepping back to see what's working, what's not working. Is that
I give a lot of prompts. Like, go make something like this that has like these qualities. Like, you're going to make a scene, go off for 10 minutes and make a scene where these characters are at a birthday party and this character sees her boyfriend kiss somebody else, and it needs to have a moment of slow motion and a moment where a pop song plays and a moment where everybody's talking at the same time.
And how do you know to do that for the scene?
How do I know?
Yeah, I mean, like, where does your inspirations to say, I want to see this, this, and this, to give the directive? Like, have you... It's just so hard for me to understand. If you're not working from a narrative and you haven't already seen it, how do you know what to even, like, what context that you want to create?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I guess we do start with an original story. So we're like, all right, beginning, middle, end. Beginning,
characters.
These characters come together.
Yeah.
Or like some of them come together. Like this play has maybe 15 characters, but we only have 6 people or 7 people, so it's going to have 7. Who are the 7? Let's start experimenting with characters. So go off and make a scene where there's this character Z and this character Ivanov, and they're doing something. It's just this process of like layering where it's like, well, if at the end of the day we're going to need characters, events, and relationships, then we're going to create 1,500 little scenelets that explore characters. And you kind of pick and explore scenes and explore what the relationships are like. And then we're going to need a plot. And it's like over time, these improvisations and beginning to sequence them together starts to create a very like macro draft of something. And it doesn't have most of the things you need for the play, but you're like, okay, it seems like what we're getting attracted to are like these 7 characters.
And then just to interject there, how on earth do you figure out who the character is? Your ensemble is a very diverse group of people with, I'm sure, very specific types of personalities. So how do you cast something like that? Do you decide that, you would probably be the right person for Ivanov, or does that emerge from the whole collaboration?
Emerges. Yeah, because, especially the first few shows, I didn't do any casting. And what's kind of nice is it's like, well, the actor is creating, anytime they dive into an improvisation, they're bringing all of their skills and qualities to whatever that role is they're creating in the moment. So it's like, I don't have an idea. Well, that's not what Ivanov is like. So I'm like, well, I don't know what Ivanov is like. In this version, you are what Ivanov is like. So it's like if Nick Wren, who's the original Ivanov, starts to like be Ivanov in the improvisations that we start to do, we're like, okay, well, you're Ivanov and he's like this. And then Kaya, who you just saw in Cyrano, she plays Sasha, who's this like 16-year-old like YouTube diva who is like extremely exuberant, but her parents have just died and she's dealing with this like insane grief that she's covering up by being this like social media YouTube star. And it's like, well, that Sasha is the Sasha that emerged from Kaya playing that role in improvisations from the beginning. And so it just patterns start to emerge, I guess. And then other choices start to fall away. So it's like if there's a billion choices to begin with, then each time we do another improvisation, something becomes clearer. And we start to go down a pathway so that eventually it's like, well, looks like Kaya is Sasha, the 16-year-old. Gracie is Anna, the sick girlfriend of Ivanov. Garrett is the like boisterous gay boyfriend who is trying to like keep this house in order, and people just start to fall into who they're going to be. And I just accept it. And it's like as they start to jive with something they're playing, I'm like, okay, like it seems like you're really clicking and like something's really starting to happen. And we just like without verbally saying anything, this like agreement about what we're creating starts to unfold.
Yeah, so you like really become a unit, a single unit that moving.
We're hearing
the coyotes. Yeah, that's why she was starting to bark. So we're going to hear Bree and the coyotes doing the background to April's podcast.
I love that.
Hold on, we might have to hold on. We're going to just break for 1 second. Okay, we're back. The coyotes seem to have calmed down.
They've calmed
and
down.
Bree has calmed down a little bit. So we were talking about casting and then and getting in character, and you guys are so now you're kind of moving as a unit, like a dance troupe. It's improv, you know, you're or jazz musicians or anything. You're working as a entity. How did that carry over back into living? So you're practicing this play. You've got something like actively that you're creating. Did the characters come back into your living situation? Like, how did you separate practice from life, especially in isolation?
I mean, it was a weird, I don't know. I mean, it was a weird time because you reference like when people go on retreats for bonding, and it's like that was such a funny time because there was no clear picture of when it would be over. So like as opposed to a retreat, it felt more like Lord of the Flies. Like this is what the world is now.
Right,
and we don't know when that's going to ever change. And so it was like, I think when we go to retreats, we're like, well, this is going to end. And then we go back to life and hopefully we learned something. And this is like, we're forging a new world. And there was something we were able to surrender into the creation of it all because there was not a definite end date. So I think living was like, I had such a different experience than most people did in COVID because most people were alone or with their partner. And I was with 9 people for most of COVID in a house together, working every day. And it was wild, but it was also very orderly in the sense that, yeah, that's a crazy thing to do. But at the same time, we had to wake up every day and everyone had to meet on my rooftop at 8 a.m. And we would write morning pages, which is a practice from Julia Cameron's The Artist's Way, where you have to write 3 handwritten like journal pages every day. And we all did The Artist's Way together. So all 12 weeks of it. And it was like, you had to be there at 8. And if you were late, it was like, hey, why were you late? Don't be late. Then after that, we would like start rehearsal, and then we would have designated lunch times, and then we would keep rehearsing, and there was a schedule every single day. So it was like, there were crazy things, like we would all go to the mountains together, but at the same time, we like kept this very regimented schedule in order, I think, to say, we're deciding to do this crazy thing together, but we're working. Like, we're not here just like
Screw off.
Yeah, screwing around. We are actually very serious, and we need to complete this big project.
And did you know what did complete look like, that you were going to perform it? And did you know that, were you going to perform it in the house? Or was that, you know, like from a stage, like how did you figure that part out?
Well, we knew it wasn't for a stage. And we knew that it wasn't for a stage. Like we knew that wherever it ended up being, and where it ended up being was every room of our house, that's the kind of experience that it was.
But have you ever been to a venue where it happens like that? I mean, we talked about the McKittrick Hotel, I think is what it's called, but it's still, I mean, that's a theatrical venue for the most part.
I had done some site-specific work before. Like I had done with 3 of the original actors in Exodus. I had done a project with the museum, MCA, Museum of Contemporary Art in Chicago. And we had created a short adaptation of a Kafka novel in a freight elevator. And God. At MCA. And so I already had this like attraction to different kinds of spaces. And I was sort of like over prosceniums. And so that was something that was like already very interesting to me.
So that was was part of your intention when you came here, is that you were going to do part of what was going to be uncharacteristic of typical theater was even the venue. You knew from the get-go.
Yeah, because in my head, when I invited everyone to move here, we would rehearse outside. That was like the obvious thing in my head, but then when we got here, it was more complicated because we found out we couldn't be outside in groups larger than 5 in Santa Fe. So I was like, okay, well, we're not actually allowed to be together in public. So or outside. So I guess we'll do it in the house. And so that was kind of a shift. But as soon as shortly after we started like creation mode in the house, it was like, oh yeah, it's in a house. And Chekhov plays are usually in houses. And they're like these groups of people that come together in houses. And then there's like dynamite that explodes because you're shoving different groups of people who have complicated feelings for each other into an estate. And we're like, oh, that's where we are. We're in this estate.
Yeah.
Where these families are coming together.
So when did you finally perform it?
Yeah, so we basically worked and worked and worked on it, and we created this show from scratch that was like almost 4 hours long. It's a little shorter now. It's like 3 hours long and change. But we were like, okay, we need to do it for someone because we don't know if we're going to stick around or like what's going to happen next year. So we had our friend who we'd gone to school with drive down from Utah and film it because he had a lot of like behind the camera experience and was also an actor. He came down for like 2 or 3 days and we showed it to him, and then he filmed like an archival like tape of it. And then we were like, well, that's great, but we want to like do it for someone. And so I had a friend here who I'd gone to St. John's with, and we called her, and we were like, I called her, no one else knew her. And I was like, do you want to see this thing that we made? And she was like, okay. So she came over to the house and we performed this 4-hour experience for just her. And then at the end, she was like, whoa, I feel like that was like, I just had like what was worth like a $3,000 ticket. And that's when I was kind of like, huh, like that's interesting, because I didn't think about money at all. And I hadn't thought about like, well, what is the value of this experience? And she was like, well, that was one of the greatest artistic experiences of my life. And I feel like the value is like so high. And I was like, the first time I hadn't even thought about like money or like how this would work, because we didn't know if we'd keep doing it. And then she was...
So for you, it was in the doing of it. Mm-hmm. And how was her... and I want to get back to the money piece, but how was her witnessing of it? How did that impact the experience of having done it? So you've been working on this for months and months and months and months, and now you have this third thing, or this...
Yeah, because we'd done it, like I'd seen it, but I'm very different because it's like I'm making it with them, watching it with them. My partner had seen it, but he was also sort of like in the group. Matt, who'd filmed it, had seen it. But then when Maggie came, it was like, I don't know, it was like, okay, like there was like that little bit of nervousness that we hadn't had with each other, and it was all for one person,
right?
For 4 hours of taking them through this like pretty epic experience that ends in like a profoundly tragic way that they're witnessing alone. So it was exciting and nerve-wracking. And then afterwards we just did this like, I don't know, 30-minute like feedback session with her because it felt like we should. And then she left. And then I like had coffee with her like a week later, and it was like through her eyes that I started to see that like maybe making this happen was not as crazy as I thought it was. And that things that seemed so nuts to me, like, well, yeah, like at the time, she was like, well, how much money do you need to raise to like keep people here? And I was like, oh, I don't know, like $20,000. And in my head, that was like impossible. And she was like, okay, well, it's not that bad. I was like, really? And it was like, I would talk to her. She works in a pretty high position at Meow Wolf. And so she was able to like start getting this kind of business and number stuff into my head in a way that was very new at the time. And just like begin to think about like, what does it mean to crunch numbers? What would you need to charge? Does charging even make sense with like how expensive it would be? And those conversations sort of set up the groundwork for taking very seriously, like, what does it mean to keep doing this together as the pandemic starts to fade away.
Ease a little bit. And so what was the experience of your fellow ensemblers? I mean, did they... What was it as satisfying for them to just have, I mean, if the goal was just to produce this thing that wouldn't bore you, and you've gotten to the point where you have the beginning, the middle, and end, you've got it, the choreography through the rooms, you've got a thing, you've thinged it, you've done that. Now it's done. Is there a hunger to start from scratch and do a whole nother one, or was it not complete until you got to have the audience experience? Say a little bit more about space.
We wanted to show people, but we had to make the decision. Like when we showed Maggie, it was December of 2020. So everybody was gonna leave and go to their families for the holidays. And we had to make the decision together. Like after the holidays, are we gonna come back or are we gonna go back to like our normal life? And we decided that we'd come back. And I think people were... They were eager for the work to be shown, but it seemed like people were equally eager to begin the next thing. And so when we got back and moved into a different house together, we did start showing Ivanov. Well, we had to translate it into the new house.
Sure.
And then we did start showing it. And at the same time, we started developing the next show together.
And did you use the same process?
We used the same pitching process, yeah. So everybody could put forth a source text. We would investigate, we would vote, and then the final winner was chosen through a vote. And that second show was Bathsheba from the David and Bathsheba story in the Bible.
Well, it must have been so satisfying for you to have the dream fulfilled of knowing that at some point you wanted to work with this cast of incredible actors.
Yeah.
And now you've done it. You've succeeded. So what was going through your mind? Did it just whet your appetite for more? I mean, what role did you play in convincing them or inviting them to take on this next project of Bathsheba?
I mean, I think my main role, other than the creative, which is directing the pieces, is, and especially in the early years, was figuring out how to make it possible logistically, because doing it was really hard and we never were part-time. So it was always like my belief, and I think our shared belief, that to create something extraordinary means doing it all the time, full time. And it's a little bit different for like a visual artist or a solitary artist can make a schedule. A group of people, like in my art form, we need everybody to be there together all the time. And that means that this has to be everybody's job. And that's really hard to do, especially when we didn't have very much money. So it was like, okay, we still don't have very much money, but it was like, we need a house that everybody can pay $300 a month for rent and afford. We need to share cars. We need to get everybody on Medicaid and health insurance. We need everybody to apply for food stamps. We need to like make the conditions that make it possible for a group of 10 people to work together 8 hours a day, every single day. And I think the thing I did that's most important actually isn't artistic. It was this like tireless commitment to the fact, to the belief that doing this would require it to always be a full-time job for everyone, and figuring out how that would be possible.
And so, you've taken it completely out of the context of a typical theater venue where people are buying tickets, and the income or the revenue stream is certain based on how many seats you can fill and all of that. So how did you get from this germ of an idea and to bringing people in, and the performance, from what I understand, it's still not an expensive ticket. It's free. It's a volunteer pay as what you want. So how on earth did you figure out the mathematics to make that work? And that really points to another skill set that you have, in addition to masterminding this incredible creative component, to be able to mastermind a financial context for this is another kind of creativity. So say a little bit how you got to that.
Yeah, well, I think it required being very attuned to everyone's individual needs and being like, okay, life is a combination of, among other things, how much things cost. How can I make that cost so low for people? What is it going to take? Well, it's going to take people only needing to pay $300 a month for rent. Student loans are suspended right now. I know they don't have to pay that right now. They make so little money, I know they can get food stamps. Okay, that's going to give them $200 a month for groceries. Then I just need to cover a little bit more right now for them. And so it's getting really specific about what's the in and out of people's income versus expenses. And everyone's in a different situation, but I could kind of be well, I know what the rent costs because we're all being housed together. I know what this costs. I know what this costs. So I just had to be really intentional about creating that whole ecosystem of how living would work, which required really tough living conditions for a while, because living together and working together in any context is pretty crazy. And that was necessary for the beginning. And I think important that that's no longer how we live, but it was how it had to be for the first couple of years. When the way revenue started working, and it happened really fast, right? Because it's we made this play, we showed it to one person in December, everyone went home. I had to scout and negotiate for super cheap rent for 2 houses for the team. They came back in February. We started performing for audiences of 6 at a time in March. And it was these tiny audiences, and it was just sort of an accident that after each performance we'd be hey, if you liked that, please make a donation. And we started to notice that people would give a lot. People who seemed like they were just like us would be wow, that was life-changing, and there were only 6 of us. Here's $500. And we were whoa, people are really giving. And that money, because we didn't have overhead, rent for a theater, or operational costs, it was everything in is going to go in a bucket to then go back out to these artists, because the only thing that matters is they need to have enough money to live. And we just did that performance after performance. And I remember the first time someone gave $1,000, and I was just that's the most money I've ever seen. That's crazy. And then I remember a couple weeks later, someone came to a show who I didn't know, and they pulled me aside afterward, and they were just this really unassuming Southern gentleman, and he was that was amazing. I want to give you $30,000. And I was what? And I took him to lunch, and I was thank you so much. What do you want? And he was I just want y'all to stay here and keep doing what you're doing. And I was okay, well, maybe we just need to be really upfront and honest and be we're doing this. If you want it to be here, please support us. And also we acknowledge that some people some people's $50 is the same as some people's $5,000. Some people's $5 is the same as some people's $1,000. And to, I think, always give voice to that explicit difference in people, and then just ask people to like show up in the way that they can. And by saying that every single performance, we found that like, okay, the performance you went to, someone gave $5, someone gave $1,000, someone gave $50, someone gave $500. And it's like a bunch of people gave $10, and people sort of come together and make this thing work. And it's really like unpredictable, and yet it's been like predictable show after show.
That's just so amazing.
It's really crazy. Yeah. And I think it's just like, obviously we're all really passionate about what we do, and the group is extremely talented. That's really important. But also, we just ask people for what we need, and then we produce a lot as well. And people have been pretty amazing in meeting us where they are, where we are. And last year we raised $600,000. But also that's what it costs.
Right.
Now. Whereas when we started, it's like, it costs a lot. Well, we didn't even think about costs. I was just like, well, I need these people to be able to like live. And now it's like, well, we have 10 or 11 professional artists. This is their job. This is what they do every day. They need to be compensated fairly.
And they've all moved from wherever they came from to Santa Fe, and they're now permanent residents. We're so lucky to have all of you.
Yeah.
And so now I want to drill down a little bit. And so here you are, 400
episodes.
shows.
I like that.
Shows later, of however many, you said 7 productions or something. And currently in the Cyrano series, which was just so creative and so, I don't want to say hilarious, because there were some hilarious parts, but there were some very dramatic, very poignant, very touching parts, to the point where I was crying. And I couldn't help but notice, even though I was so captivated by what was going on, because often you were not too, there were 16 of us in the audience.
Yeah, 15.
And, so sometimes we were sort of all lined up, and you'd be there at the end taking notes. And there was another gal who was also taking notes, I noticed. And so I was wondering, the version of what I saw was flawless, I would say. And so I asked you this the other day, like, what on earth were you taking notes about?
Yeah, everything from technical stuff that has to do with light and sound, but more often scene work stuff, because we're creating the show together and it's always fresh. And especially in these early performances, it changes every day. I'm watching to understand, like, how does this scene need to work? And to hear something be like, no, you shouldn't say that. I think you should say something more like this. Or like, that scene spun out longer than it needed to. Why don't you just end it like after you hit the conflict here?
So in a scene like that, because again, you have no script.
Yeah.
And so an actor has to remember from scene to scene, from show to show, approximately what they did the time before, what the dynamic was. And obviously it gets so in their bones that they can do that. Yeah. But how do you give notes on something that is so immediate and in the moment?
Yeah. In a very normal way, actually. I mean, they have some of the most incredible muscles as actors, because they have to be able to take a note from me and implement it like immediately in the next show, and do it every single night, just like changing. Every show they do up through opening and beyond is different, and they have to be ready to take an adjustment and just run with it. And that's not a skill, that's a rare skill. And the speed with which they're able to like synthesize a note is pretty rare, and comes from doing this all the time and being really talented. But giving notes is actually it's very normal, and in a way it's a lot like how I did it in my previous director life, where it's like, okay, well, you're going to get a note. It might be about saying lines differently, but it's just we give the notes and we receive the notes like you would an actor in a play with a script.
Well, I mean, and obviously they have a certain amount of trust in you that, you're seeing it from the audience perspective, and you have a perspective that they can't see because they're in it doing it. So you're bird's eye view, or for lack of a better word. And so, you get to see the whole context. Yeah.
Yeah. And every night it's sort of like we're writing a novel and it's not done yet. And it's either a novel or a symphony, but it's not done yet. And so every night we're changing the notes or the sentences to try to get it to that living, breathing ecosystem where the entire thing is in dialogue with the rest of the entire thing. And to get there, that means that the chapters are going to have to change every night. The way the chapter starts is going to have to change. And they're in it, like, as these characters, as these sentences. And they have to just be ready to be like, okay, well, tonight we're cutting chapter 3. And tonight, maybe last night, chapter 4 ended with this big bang. But tonight, it's just going to end with this little whimper. And they're like, okay. And then I might give the note and be like, did you want to just try that real quick? And they'll be like, no, I'm good. I'll do it in performance tonight. Or they might be like, yeah, let's try that. And so they're just ready.
And with 16 audience members, I would imagine, I mean, given that it was an interactive experience as an audience member, and, my name was actually woven into the context of the show, and I was sort of startled. I was like, oh, there's a Lily in this show. And then I realized that you were just riffing off whoever was in the audience. Yeah. And that was really, it was startling in a good way, but obviously they have a skill set as improvisers that they can kind of take into consideration who the audience in that slice of time is. I mean, we had I brought Bree, so you had, even Bree got into the action somehow. I'm not really sure how she was referred.
She did, yeah.
But, it was just, it's fascinating. So do your artists express, I mean, this must be amazing for them, your whole troupe, because they've left conventional theater and now they're doing this with you. What feedback do you get from them as actors in this experience?
I mean, it's a lot. We ask a lot of our actors. So I think it's it's some of the most challenging, intensive work that an actor can undertake. And it's very physical. And they're running, I don't know how big those galleries are. Tens of thousands of square feet. And as you experience, you're moving from place to place. Meanwhile, the actors, to get to a place, are having to run around the whole building to get in. So it's very physical, it's very emotional, and it's very demanding in terms of how present and aware you have to be and be with the audience every night. So I think it's really hard, but the level of autonomy that an actor gets to have in terms of what they're creating in Exodus is really pretty high. Most of them do their primary theater work with Exodus. We have someone on Broadway right now who'll be back later, but they do lots of TV and film and commercials outside of this work. So it's they're on set, but that's a very different, it's almost the opposite in the, it's a microscopic slice of something that you're shooting and then you're stopping and everything is very precise. So I think it's actually really useful that they're moving back and forth from TV and film and camera work back into Exodus work, because I think our work, though highly theatrical, also feels very immediate. Cinematic, yes. Immediate. It feels kind of TV show-y, movie-y. So I like them to be TV and film actors who then can bring that into a more expressive medium of theater.
So do you think that this is, what you've hit on here is something that is trending in theater in general, or is it very, very unique to you guys? I don't know enough about theater to be able to comment about that.
I think it's pretty unique to us because it required us to create a completely different framework of creation. So in my former life as a director, you get 3 weeks to rehearse, and then there's no time for risk. Everything is just too little time, too little everything.
Well, because it's part of a financial machine,
Yeah, a machine that's like not conducive to anything except like a very systematic way of programming. And I was always just like, well, that's not how art works. And like, sure, that's how these big theaters work, but I don't think, and I think theater's demonstrating that it's not gonna keep surviving with audiences unless it changes. And so I think, I don't know, like even the McKittrick Hotel that you saw, Sleep No More, that is an immersive theater, but it's a very different style than ours because it's like environmental. Like you're exploring an environment. Ours moves from room to room, but it's all driven by the acting and the narrative, which to me is like, how can we take what's most essential about theater, which is an opportunity to see extraordinary acting and extraordinary stories, and keep those things there as the heartbeat, but then adopt contemporary frameworks that can be exciting again to people.
Well, yeah, I mean, there's no lack of excitement with what you're doing. So I should add that when you were referring to the thousands of square feet, you are now domiciled at CCA, which is important to say, and hopefully you'll be there for a while. And it seems to be a really good venue for you. Mm-hmm. And so how are you, what's your vision for keeping this a sustainable thing? As taxing as it is on the actors, as taxing as it is on your, spreadsheet, what do you envision for the future? What's your ideal? Like if you could speak into the audience, your wish for Exodus going forward, what does that look like?
Well, my wish for Exodus is that we can always be based in Santa Fe. It's very important to us. Our community is important, but that we can increasingly share our work in other cities. So we want to be able to take the work to New York, which we are planning on doing soon. And then we want to be able to take the work to other cities and countries internationally, and to have a voice and to be a leader in the future of theater, not only like from Santa Fe, but across the country. And then,
and so that obviously is going to mean not a single, the small ensemble that you have now, but it sounds like you would need, in order to keep it active, or would it just be one troupe that travels to various different places and then makes their way back to Santa Fe? I mean, I imagine there are a lot of different ways this to play out, but to have an Exodus troupe in San Francisco, in Boston, in Chicago, in New York, or is it more like this particular group goes everywhere, which is exhausting just sounding?
Yeah, well, to me it is this group, because I think something that's special about Exodus is that it's not really franchisable. Not that other people can't be inspired by like what we're making, but it's like an exquisite, obsessive attention to the work of art and who's making it and how it's made.
Yeah.
And there's only one of me, there's only one of each of these actors. I think what needs to happen is like, we have grown, we've gotten so that the actors can have coverage, where it's like, if so-and-so books a TV show, we have another actor who's understudying.
Right, okay.
That's new, actually.
Yeah.
We used to have it where like, if someone got sick, we had to cancel the show.
Oh, wow.
For like years, because we just didn't have enough like coverage. And so that's been growth into the sustainable. And then as we move forward, it's like, well, we do need to grow a bit. We need more talent. We also need more support. But ideally, it's like we keep what's essential about who we are while we grow the infrastructure so that we can be in New York and do the London trip and always come back here. And I think what's so cool about Santa Fe is like, we grow these pieces here, and we have these audiences now that have been with us. Like, what's neat is like a lot of people have seen all 7 shows, and a lot of people have seen them in their very early stages, and then years later, and they've seen like 6 different casts do these shows. And so we have this like family here that like understands how we work. And so we always want this to be like where our home is, and then go do a 4-week tour in New York.
Right.
And 3 weeks in London.
Well, that is my wish for you too, then.
Thanks.
Yeah. And I'm really excited that I'll get to spend some more time with you because we're about to do this project at CCA, this collaboration lab, and you're going to be on the panel for that. And I think your episode is going to air right in the middle of that, probably right before we do your panel. So this will be a nice integration piece. And so people can find you at ExodusEnsemble.com
or on Instagram at the Exodus Ensemble.
Okay, great. Well, we'll leave it there. Thank you so much,
Thank
April.
you.
Take care. Okay. Well, thanks for joining us today. Please like and follow us on artstorming.org, where you'll find a list of our shows, a transcript of this episode with links to the guest page, as well as our other projects. ArtStorming is brought to you and supported by ArtBridge and listeners like you. Look for us on your favorite podcast platforms.